I spoke yesterday about the VAT on private schools that has an impact, has a knock-on impact on teachers, and a lot of the newspapers today have picked up this story. And when Rachel Reeves unveiled her VAT policy on private school fees, she declared that it would end unjustifiable tax breaks and raise £1.7 billion annually to fund 6,500 new state school teachers, a bold move pitched as a populist correction to a long-standing inequity. But in this new political arithmetic, one variable was poorly calculated, and that was the teacher. And we need to remember that behind every spreadsheet policy there is human cost, and in this case it's falling disproportionately on the shoulders of the 35,000 teachers and support staff working across 1,700 independent schools, many of whom now find themselves subject to Dickensian working conditions, like something out of Nicholas Nickleby, under 21st century branding. So the basic mechanics, VAT now levied at 20%, has dramatically increased operating costs for private schools, together with, of course, the what is it? The thing where the employer's tax, the employer's contribution, the and especially those schools that are unable or unwilling to pass on the full burden to already overstretched parents. Most schools have passed on at least 10%, some of the full amount, but others, especially mid-tier institutions and faith schools with lower fee structures, have absorbed the hit by slashing internal budgets. And where does the blade fall? On staff time, staff pay, staff well-being. And according to Daniel Kebede, the General Secretary of the National Education Union, private school teachers are now routinely working overtime without compensation. And in boarding schools particularly, expectations are extreme. Staff are on call overnight, cover unsociable at weekend hours, receive neither time in lieu nor additional pay. And these schools, once OACs of privilege, now mirror the most exploitative features of the gig economy contracts. Such times as the head deems reasonable is the chilling contractual phrase that many now endure, language more reminiscent of a Victorian household than a modern employer. And the stress this causes is not hypothetical. Teachers are reporting burnout, support staff essential but often invisible, work hours that they're not paid for, particularly during extracurricular activities like sports trips or emergencies, like the unfortunate pupil vomiting at 3 a.m., the scenario recently cited by Brian Metcalf of the NEU. The school is open 24/7 and increasingly so are the staff. This isn't merely a matter of poor employment practice, it's a matter of breaching the Working Time Regulations 1998 safeguard, which is supposed to guarantee rest periods and working time limits. The union has voted to campaign actively against schools breaching these laws, yet enforcement remains patchy, and private schools are often emboldened by a culture of silence reinforced by non-disclosure agreements and institutional conservatism. And what is the response from the government? The Treasury's line is that these schools must adapt to the market, that if parents can afford to opt out of the state system, they can afford a tax. But this ignores a truth hiding in plain sight, that many of these schools are not Eton. They serve pupils with special educational needs, often funded through personal disability allowances, and increasingly those children are now at risk of being priced out, leaving teachers struggling not only to meet higher budgets, but to support increasingly vulnerable students without adequate resources. And the legal case now moving through the High Court makes precisely this point. Lawyers argue that this VAT policy indirectly discriminates against pupils with special needs whose only viable educational pathway is private. And their departure would throw additional burdens on teachers in both sectors, independent staff managing departures and state school teachers coping with increased class sizes, complexity, and inevitably chaos. And then there's the politics of implementation. Reeves was warned 8 months prior to the rollout that launching the policy on January the 1st, the most disruptive option, would give schools no time to restructure, renegotiate, or cushion impact. She proceeded anyway. It was, in short, a shock and awe tax reform executed with maximum political symbolism and minimum operational compassion. Yet this policy, designed to redistribute educational funding, may inadvertently redistribute exhaustion. Far from levelling the playing field, it risks levelling the profession, grinding down those in independent schools, just as those in the state sector remain overworked and underpaid, and very shortly, because of the further collapse of independent schools, of the smaller independent schools, going to be dealing with bigger class sizes. In conclusion, we have to ask, is this what education equality looks like? Shared anxiety across the board? Labour is right to question privilege and to tax equity, but policy should not punish teachers for the sins of a system that they didn't create. If VAT on school fees remains, it must be accompanied by proper transitional support, robust labour protections, and an honest reckoning with how educational staff are treated across all schools. For if we fail to protect our teachers, whether public or private, we imperil the very idea of education as a profession, let alone a vocation. What we actually need is not this fantasy idea that we can put adverts in the press and get more teachers, but the actual idea that we need to re-evaluate the way teaching is conducted in our country, because at the moment we are maintaining a 19th century or even an 18th century approach to education in the 21st century, and it doesn't work. And simply increasing the amount of exams doesn't sort out the fact that our teaching methodology is not taking full advantage of the of the various media opportunities and AI that is sweeping across the rest of our society. We need to get to grips with the way we do our teaching.